Hi, my name is Morgan, and this is a self-portrait that I just painted. I thought it'd be interesting to film the process and make a video about it, so I did. In this video, you're going to watch me paint it and then also listen to me talk about it. So here we go. Okay, so I started out just by covering the whole surface of the paper with this light red color. I've found that it's much easier to paint a portrait when I'm not working on a bright white surface, and it's also a lot less intimidating. So then I started using a darker color to figure out placement and roughly sketch out the features of the face. I'm keeping it simple because I know it's just going to get covered up and I don't want to get too attached to the initial sketch. Here I'm clarifying some of the areas and then using a darker red color to mark where the darkest values will be. Looking back, I wish I had spent a little more time on this stage just because I later realized that I was a little too eager to get started with the color, so I didn't really have the best foundation, but I jumped right in, adding some very broad areas of color. I used large blocks and shapes to start to define features without getting bogged down by the details. Because I didn't start with a detailed sketch, I needed to focus on these larger shapes first. So I started with the skin with pink, yellow, and gray tones. There's the light gray and black areas of the shirt, and then brown and yellow-ish tones in the hair. I really like this stage in the painting. There's so many interesting interactions between the colors, and it's so cool to see like these large, messy brush strokes. Here I goofed up a little bit with the hair. I tried adding some yellow because I wanted it to look backlit, but I didn't do the best job mixing the color, so I had to cover it. But then I moved on to the background, which was very satisfying to do. The blue adds a lot of contrast to the rest of the colors, and it's just with the pinkish skin tone and the yellow in the hair, it's the perfect complementary color, and it really rounds out the whole color palette. So I focused on getting all of the base colors onto the page at the same time, which would make sure that they were all working together. I added some shades of blue to the jaw, some lighter tones to the cheek, and started focusing on filling in gaps in spaces where the background red color was still very obvious. I'm slowly adding highlights like on the neck there to build up dimensionality. And at this point, I'd consider this painting to be deep within its ugly phase, which is a very important part of every painting, as terrible as it is. All of the base colors are there, but I haven't been able to start defining any of the features yet, so everything looks a bit off right now. And it's definitely going to get a lot worse before it can get better. But that's just how it has to be. Here I am actually going in to start shaping the nose and start trying to define the rest of the features. I wanted to mention that this painting is very outside my comfort zone. I have much more experience with digital art, which I make with a graphics tablet in Photoshop on my computer. But lately I've been trying to branch out and work more with paint, mostly focusing on gouache and acrylic paintings like this one. As much as I like digital artwork, I'm realizing that there's something really special about making art with paint and like physical materials, and it's just so much fun to feel like a painter. So speaking of paint, I also wanted to explain a little more about my materials and my setup. So I'm working on a piece of watercolor paper that I taped to a drawing board. that I have, and just to film this video, the painting is hanging off of a tripod, which is supposed to be a temporary solution until I acquire an easel, but it worked surprisingly well for this painting. I'm using craft acrylic paint, which I picked because it's the least intimidating art supply I could find, especially for this kind of painting. It's really cheap and also quite familiar, and I also have a ton of it that I've acquired over the years, so it just seemed like the right choice. I'm planning on using these paints a lot more in the future just because of how nice they look in the painting. Especially here, you can see that they just have like a really cool texture, which for me was perfect because it made it easy to mix different colors, and they also layer on top of each other really well. Because they're not completely opaque, I was able to use that feature to get them to mix better on the paper, even though they had already dried and they dried quickly. And as you can see, I had to do a lot of layers in this painting, especially in the large areas of color like the skin, as well as over features like the nose and the ear. I had to keep going over these areas to try to get the colors I wanted and to sculpt those features. And I was constantly moving around the painting, going over different areas over and over again, trying to achieve the likeness and the appearance I wanted. And it's around this spot here that I realized just how distorted some of the proportions were. I noticed that the neck was really long, so I had to adjust the collar of the shirt and repaint some of the areas nearby to compensate. So this is basically my first attempt at a large-scale acrylic portrait, so it's certainly not perfect, but I learned so much from this process. Because of my experience drawing digitally, I'm able to draw portraits and make sure that they actually look like the person that they're supposed to be. But one thing I don't have as much experience with is mixing colors. I was really nervous about having to mix the paint, and I thought it was going to add so much time to the painting process. But I think I really surprised myself. Like, the colors are my favorite part of this piece. I'm obsessed with all of the hue variation in the skin, especially with the blue and green tones in the jaw and the neck, and the pink and orange areas around the nose and eyes, and the purples and the shadows. I think it's so interesting to think about how I could probably never recreate this in Photoshop, but it's just how the paint mixed and reacted. If I could redo this painting, there are some things I'd change. I can see that some of the proportions are off, and I didn't quite achieve the backlighting effect that I was going for. But as I said, I love all the colors and textures, and I'm just so excited to make more stuff like this in the future. So this painting is nearly finished, so I'm cleaning up some of the areas, adding final details. I actually really love being able to go back and watch this part of the process. This painting is almost done, and I'm just at the point now where I'm making small changes and just fixing some of the areas that still seem a little off. It's interesting to see what final changes I had to make to the painting before I could consider it being finished. Like this patch of color on the forehead, or covering this part of the red background that I missed earlier. So now I'm peeling off the tape, and then we'll see the final result. Thanks for watching.